I have commanded warships bigger than office buildings. I have led 300 sailors through Category 5 typhoons in the Pacific. I have made split-second decisions in the Strait of Hormuz with Iranian gunboats lockstepped on my radar, holding the safety of my crew in the palm of my hand. But standing in the ballroom of the Naval Heritage Center in Washington, D.C., wearing a plain black dress that cost $80 on sale, all I felt was small. I wasn't Commander Walker here. I wasn't the skipper. I was just Charlie's daughter, the quiet one, the one who showed up. The room was filled with the smell of expensive cologne, old brass, and ambition. It was my father's night. Rear Admiral Charles Charlie Walker, Ret Mar, was receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Surface Navy Association. It was a capstone to a career that he talked about every single day of my life. He stood at the podium, bathed in a golden spotlight, looking every inch the hero believed himself to be. His tuxedo was tailored perfectly. His hair, silver and distinguished, caught the light as he nodded to the applause. Beside me, my mother, Marianne, dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. On her other side sat my brother, Nate. Nate was the golden boy, a lieutenant commander in the Navy Reserves who worked a desk job at the Pentagon, helping coordinate supply logistics. He wore his dress uniform tonight, preening like a peacock. He had 2 rows of ribbons, mostly participation in unit awards, but he wore them as if he had stormed the beaches of Normandy. My father cleared his throat. The room went silent. He began his speech. It was polished, practiced. He talked about duty. He talked about sacrifice. He told the story of a storm in 1995 that everyone in the family had heard 1,000 times. The Kame family acknowledgments. "I didn't get here alone," my father said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to thank my wife, Marianne, the anchor of our family." Applause. Mom beamed. "And my son, Nate," Dad continued, gesturing proudly. "A lieutenant commander who is carrying the Walker legacy forward in the Pentagon. He's doing the hard work of keeping our fleet supplied and ready. Stand up, Nate." Nate stood up. He waved. The room clapped loudly. My father looked at him with a pride so intense it almost burned. Then Dad's eyes slid to me. The light in them dimmed just a fraction. A shift so subtle only I noticed. "And," he paused, as if remembering a footnote, "my daughter Paige, who is also serving, and she is here tonight to support her old man." That was it. No rank, no unit, no mention of what I did, just serving. It was a word he used to hide me. To him, serving for a woman meant filing papers, organizing events, or working in a supply depot far away from the danger. He assumed that's what I did. He needed that to be what I did, because in the Walker family, there was only room for one warfighter, and he had already decided it was Nate, even though Nate had never stepped foot on a combat vessel in his life. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, invisible in my black dress. I didn't blink. I didn't frown. I had practiced this face for 20 years. I wondered what would happen if I stood up. I wondered what would happen if I had worn my uniform tonight instead of this dress. If I had worn my surface warfare officer pin, my command at sea insignia, the Bronze Star with valor, I earned 2 years ago in the Red Sea. But I hadn't. I chose the black dress. I chose silence. Because I didn't want to ruin his night. I didn't want to force him to see the truth he had spent a lifetime ignoring. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. To understand why I sat in that chair in silence, you have to understand the dinner table I grew up at. I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland, in a house that breathed Navy tradition. The walls were lined with photos of ships. My father had served on. The bookshelves were filled with naval history. My father loved the Navy more than he loved anything else, and he had a very specific idea of what a naval officer looked like. He looked like Nate. When we were kids, Dad would take Nate to the backyard to throw a football or teach him how to tie knots. He would tell Nate stories about command presence and the burden of leadership. When I asked to join, Dad would smile that patronizing smile. "Paige, honey," he'd say, "why don't you help your mother with the garden? The Navy it's a rough life. Maybe you could look into being a nurse or public affairs. Those are noble jobs for a young lady." He didn't say women couldn't lead. He just made it clear that his daughter wasn't built for it. When I was 18, I got into a top-tier university with an NROTC scholarship. I told Dad I wanted to go surface warfare, to drive ships. He laughed. "Logistics, Paige," he said, cutting his steak. "Put down supply corps on your dream sheet. It's safer. You're organized. You're good at lists. Leave the ship driving to the boys." I didn't argue. I learned early that arguing with Admiral Walker was like shouting at a tide. You just got wet and tired. So I stopped telling him. I went to college. I commissioned as an ensign. I selected surface warfare. When I called home to tell him I got my first ship, a destroyer, he said, "That's nice, honey. Nate just got a job as an aide to a captain in Norfolk. Very prestigious." When I made lieutenant, I sent a photo. He texted back, "Looking sharp. Nate is thinking about the reserves. Smart move for a career." When I screened for command, the holy grail of a naval career, I tried to tell them at Thanksgiving 3 years ago. "Dad," I said, sitting at the table, "I have big news. I screened for command. I'm going to be the CO of a ship." Dad looked up from his turkey. "CO? You mean like an executive officer or a department head?" "No, Dad. Commanding officer, the captain." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You probably mean a support detachment, Paige, or a shore command. They give those titles out to everyone these days to boost morale. But that's great, honey. Really great." He turned to Nate. "Nate, tell us about that budget report you filed." That was the moment the door closed forever. He couldn't hear me. It wasn't that he couldn't understand. It was that his worldview didn't allow for a reality where his quiet, organized daughter was a warrior and his golden boy son was a bureaucrat. So I stopped trying. I let them believe I was a supply officer. I let them believe I pushed papers in Pearl Harbor. I let them believe I was safe. Meanwhile, I was hunting submarines in the North Atlantic. I was tracking missile launches off the coast of Korea. I was standing on the bridge of the USS Fitzgerald, staring down hurricane responsible for the lives of 300 souls. I lived 2 lives. In one, I was Paige the logistics girl. In the other, I was the old man, the skipper, the one you looked to when the alarms started screaming. And tonight, those 2 lives were about to collide. The applause for my father finally died down. He beamed, holding his award, a heavy brass plaque mounted on walnut wood. "Thank you," he said. "This honor means the world to me. To see my name on the wall of this institution, it is the greatest achievement of my life." He stepped back from the podium. The master of ceremonies, a retired captain, stepped up to close the event. But before he could speak, a voice broke from the back of the room. "Excuse me." It was loud, urgent, not rude, but authoritative. Heads turned. A young man in dress whites was standing near the entrance. He looked like an active duty lieutenant. He was staring at the wall behind the podium, the wall of honor, where the names of all past recipients were engraved on gold plates. "Sir," the lieutenant said, addressing the master of ceremonies, I apologize for the interruption, but there seems to be confusion in the program. My father frowned, still holding his award. Confusion? Who are you, son? The lieutenant walked forward. He didn't look at my father. He looked at me. I recognized him instantly. Lieutenant Miller. He had been my operations officer on my last deployment. He was one of the best junior officers I had ever trained. I'm Lieutenant Miller, sir, he said. I served under Commander Walker on the USS Monterey. My father laughed nervously. Commander Walker? You mean my son, Nate? Nate is a lieutenant commander, son, and he's never served on the Monterey. Lieutenant Miller stopped. He looked confused. He looked at Nate, who was sitting there with a puzzled expression. Then he looked at me. No, sir, Miller said slowly. I mean, Commander, Paige Walker, the commanding officer of the Monterey. The room went dead silent. My father blinked. Paige? He looked at me. Paige works in logistics. She's in support. Miller's face hardened. He looked at my father with a mix of shock and defensiveness. With all due respect, Admiral, Miller said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent room. Commander Paige Walker is a surface warfare officer. She took command of the Monterey 2 years ago. He pointed to the wall behind the podium. And if you look at the plaque for the 2021 Distinguished Service Award, her name is already there. A gasp rippled through the room. My father turned around slowly. He squinted at the wall of brass names. There it was. 5th row down. Polished gold. CDR Paige A. Walker, 2021. For valorous service in the Red Sea. My father stared at it. He froze. It was like watching a computer crash. The data didn't compute. I don't understand, he whispered. He looked at the MC. Is this a mistake? The MC, who had been flipping through a binder, looked up. He looked pale. No, Admiral, the MC said quietly. It's not a mistake. We invited Commander Walker last year to receive it, but she was deployed. She couldn't attend. My father turned to look at me. His face was a mask of absolute bewilderment. Paige? He asked. His voice was small. You commanded the Monterey? I didn't stand up. I stayed seated. I kept my hands folded. Yes, Dad, I said softly. But you never said. I did, I said. I told you when I screened for command. You told me I probably meant a support detachment. Nate stood up then. His face was red. This is ridiculous, he scoffed. Paige, a CO? She's never even been in a firefight. It's probably an honorary thing for a humanitarian mission or something. Lieutenant Miller stepped forward again. He looked at Nate with open disdain. Humanitarian? Miller repeated. He turned to the room full of admirals and officers. 2 years ago in the Red Sea, the Monterey was targeted by 3 hostile fast attack craft armed with RPGs and anti-ship missiles, Miller announced. The room went deadly still. We took fire, Miller continued. Our radar was jammed. We were blind in the dark. The bridge was chaotic. He pointed at me. Commander Walker didn't flinch. She took manual control of the tactical picture. She maneuvered a 9,000-ton destroyer like it was a speedboat. She vectored our gunners manually. Miller's voice shook with emotion. She neutralized all 3 hostiles in under 4 minutes. She saved the ship. She saved 300 sailors, including me. He paused. She was awarded the Bronze Star with Valor for that action, and she declined a public ceremony because she said she was just doing her job. Miller stood at attention and looked at me. Skipper, he said, it's good to see you. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy. It pressed down on the room like physical weight. 200 pairs of eyes were fixed on me. But I was looking at my father. He had lowered his award. He was holding it loosely by his side, almost like he had forgotten he was holding it. He was staring at me as if I had just taken off a mask. He looked at my black dress. He looked at my hands. The hands he told me were only good for gardening or typing. "A bronze star?" he whispered. "With valor?" Nate sat down slowly. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. He looked at his own chest, at his participation ribbons, and then at me. My mother was crying. "Paige?" she sobbed. "Is that true? You were getting shot at?" I stood up then. I didn't smooth my dress. I didn't smile. "Yes, Mom," I said. I looked at my father. "I didn't wear my uniform tonight because I didn't want to embarrass you, Dad. This was your night, your legacy." I picked up my purse. "But Lieutenant Miller is right. I'm not in logistics. I'm a warfighter, and I'm damn good at it." I nodded to Miller. "Thank you, Lieutenant." Then I turned and walked out of the ballroom. My heels clicked on the floor, the only sound in a room full of people who had forgotten how to breathe. I didn't stop walking until I reached the cool night air outside. The DC wind bit at my bare arms, but it felt good. It felt real. I leaned against a stone pillar and took a deep breath. My hands were shaking, just a little. Adrenaline. Old habits. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. I finally pulled it out. 3 missed calls from Mom, 1 from Nate, then a text from Nate. "You humiliated him. Are you happy? You could have kept your mouth shut. You ruined everything." I laughed. A short, dry sound. He still didn't get it. He thought I did this to them. He couldn't see that I had spent my entire life trying to protect them from the reality of who I was, just so they could feel big. I blocked his number. I waited for a text from Dad. 5 minutes passed. 10. 30. Nothing. I wasn't surprised. Admiral Charles Walker wasn't a man who admitted he was wrong. He was a man who rewrote history until it fit his narrative. Right now, he was probably back in that room, trying to rationalize it. Oh, well, she must have had a lot of help. Or it was probably a small skirmish. I called an Uber. I went back to my hotel room. I packed my bag. I took my dress uniform out of the closet. I ran my thumb over the bronze star ribbon. The red, white, and blue fabric felt textured under my finger. I didn't need him to pin it on me. I earned it. The next morning, I flew back to Norfolk. I drove straight to the pier. There she was, my new command, the USS Yorktown, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser, massive, gray, lethal. As I walked up the gangway, the quarterdeck watchstander snapped to attention. "Stringer!" he yelled. "Strike 8 bells! Commanding officer, arriving!" Ding ding, ding ding, ding ding, ding ding. The boatswain's mate piped the whistle, a high, piercing sound that cut through the noise of the harbor. "Captain, United States Navy, arriving." I stepped onto the deck. My executive officer, XO, was waiting for me. "Welcome back, Skipper," he said. "How was the ceremony? Did your dad enjoy his award?" I looked at the ship. I looked at the crew moving with purpose on the deck. I smelled the salt and the diesel fuel. "He did," I said. "It was a nice ceremony." "And the family?" the XO asked. "Good to see them?" I paused. I thought about the silence in the ballroom. I thought about Nate's text. "They're fine," I said, "but it's good to be home." I walked toward the bridge. That afternoon, a package arrived at the ship's mailroom. It had been overnighted from DC. I took it to my sea cabin, the small room just off the bridge where the captain sleeps. I opened it. Inside was the brass plaque my father had received the night before, his Lifetime Achievement Award. There was a note taped to it. It was written on hotel stationery. The handwriting was shaky, jagged. "Paige, I walked past the wall of honor after you left. I read the citation. I realized something last night. I spent 30 years telling everyone about the Navy I served in, but I missed the Navy that was living in my own house. I gave this award back to them. I told them I didn't deserve a Lifetime Achievement Award if I couldn't even achieve the basic duty of knowing my own daughter. Nate is angry. Mom is confused. I am ashamed. You don't just serve, Paige. You lead. And you are a better officer than I ever was. I'm sorry I stopped listening. Dad, Charlie. I sat on my bunk. The ship swayed gently beneath me. I traced the letters of his note. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't ask me to call. He just acknowledged the truth. For the first time in my life, he didn't try to make me fit into his box. He broke the box. I folded the note. I put it in my desk drawer, right next to my own citation. I didn't call him, not yet. Forgiveness is like a ship turning at sea. It takes time. It takes space. You can't just spin the wheel and expect to reverse course instantly. But the turn had started. The bridge phone rang. I picked it up. Captain, I answered. Ma'am, the officer of the deck said. We have clearance to get underway. Sea and anchor detail is set, awaiting your orders. I stood up. I walked out to the bridge wing. The wind whipped my hair. The sun was setting over the water, turning the harbor into liquid gold. I looked at the horizon. I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I wasn't the logistical support. I wasn't the afterthought. I was the captain. Very well, I said into the radio. All engines ahead 1/3. Take us out. The ship shuddered as the massive engines engaged. We began to move, cutting through the water, leaving the land and the past behind us. I watched the pier fade away. I was finally seen. But more importantly, I finally realized I didn't need them to look at me to know who I was. I had the ocean. I had the ship. And I had the truth. And that was enough.